Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review a film, either current or classic. And in this case, this week we are going with a current film, a new release from Disney Animation Studios. That, of course, being Raya and the Last Dragon. Excited to jump into this conversation. Before I do, though, let me introduce my fantastic co-hosts who are going to join me in this journey through Disney's newest offering. Jim Pugliafco is with us on the show. Hey, sweetheart, how are you?
Hey, babe, I'm good. This is the one kind of semi-midweek break we get to these days to talk about movies and dive into movies, and I'm excited. So can't wait to get into it with you guys.
I'm excited that you're excited to get into it with us because I think it's going to be a fun show. I agree. Definitely nice to break the week up a little bit, hanging out with you folks. And by you folks, I, of course, include the fabulous William Lindis, who is here with us as well. Will, what's going on in your world, friend?
A whole lot and a whole lot of nothing, you know. I'm definitely in that stage of the pandemic where I'm counting down the days to my second shot, and, you know, potentially whatever I feel like doing on the other side of that second shot. But I think the biggest thing is being able to take a breath and just not stress out as much. So it's definitely like a holding period, but there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And until then, have movies to keep me company.
Oh my gosh, right? We started a 5-week countdown ourselves. Jim recently got his first shot. I got my first shot, and the roommate and the other couple in our quarantine have all got their first shots. So I think the world is going to open up a little bit at the end of that 5 weeks, but not going to go crazy. I think we need to assess some things as we get to the end of that window. We'll see what the world looks like then. But
yeah, it's like this is like a milestone for us on the show. We're all like at least to the first milepost, right, of the COVID, climbing out of this COVID mess. At least medically, we've all got our first shot. Mine is first and only shot, actually, because luck of the draw, I ended up with the single dose vaccine. So that's I'm one and done, which is fine with me. But I'm just glad we're kind of on that good road back. And Will, I can imagine how you after the tumultuous like February that you had, or end of February that you had, like I'm sure March probably feels a little anticlimactic. Maybe, I don't know.
It still feels like in a lot of ways I haven't caught my breath yet. You know, like just everything that happened, and I'm still dealing with. It sort of put a lot of like just the little things on hold, made it feel like, okay, I can't really do this right now because, and some of that's very self-imposed, but that's just the way that like stress and trauma are like just the things that you deal with, like kind of at you sideways sometimes. But getting this other shot out of the way at least will be peace of mind. Again, I'm right there with you, Brad. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be out there probably in full swing of things on the other side of this. I'm cognizant that there's a lot of people that, are not in that space yet. And I think everyone needs to do their part. But I do think that if I've personally had my safety precautions turned up to a 10, I feel maybe comfortable about maybe turning them to a 9, sort of like, and I don't know what that necessarily means or what that looks like, but it's still peace of mind is so gratifying right now.
Well, I do know that movie theaters are on my radar, especially because all the movie theaters, even with the vaccinations happening, apparently here in Tucson at least, are still ghost towns. Not many people are going. So that might be a safe thing we could look at adding back in. We'll see. But y'all didn't come here for quarantine talk. You came here for movies. So
that's our other podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't forget the Quarantine Bears podcast, QBP. But we've got a big movie to talk about this week. Sort of similar to Mulan, not Mulan, that came out several months ago. Disney is doing their premiere access to the film for $30 on top of your Disney Plus subscription. Is Raya and the Last Dragon worth $30 on top of your Disney Plus subscription? We're going to talk about our thoughts. And of course, we'd love to hear yours too. So if you're tuning in live, feel free to join us in the live chat. Let us know what you thought of the film. Was the film worth that premiere price tag? Definitely curious as to your thoughts. And even if you haven't seen the film yet, you're just hanging out, say hi. We'd love to say hi back and see you in the live chat. So welcome, Jim and Will. What do you think? Are we ready to dive in to our movie discussion?
Absolutely ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, then, that said, just a general heads up, if you're new to the show, you may be unfamiliar with our format. We're going to start our movie review discussion with 10 to 15 minutes of non-spoilers. So if you've not yet seen Raya and the Last Dragon from Disney, not to worry. We'll give you some thoughts and impressions without spoiling anything about the plot. But as always, it's a good idea to make your own opinion of a film by seeing it. If it sounds interesting, I mean, by all means, definitely do so. And we've got someone in the chat, guys, who says, hi there, boys. Hello,
Hello.
KC Sat 0 M1K. Glad to have you with us.
Hey, how's it going?
Rolls right
Welcome.
off the tongue, doesn't it?
Well, it's a pretty cute face. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So, you know. We're objectifying you, KC. I hope you're okay with that. Welcome.
That's what we do.
We're glad that he's here.
Very glad to see you. Hello. All right. Well, here we go. Our official discussion of Raya and the Last Dragon. All right. Jim, if you wouldn't mind setting us up here a little bit, just give us a brief synopsis of the film, what it's about, and your initial impressions. Did you think this was worth the $30 price tag? Did you enjoy the film? Go for it.
Sure. Yeah, so this one we were kind of looking forward to for a while when we saw the first trailer, especially when we saw the first trailer, and then we saw a second trailer, which kind of took the edge off the excitement a little bit. That's what I get for watching second trailers, which is kind of against my rule in the first place. But yeah, we went and we opened up our Disney Plus app that we subscribe to, and we expected to go in and, pay for a rental of the movie or whatever. And kind of taken back a little bit by the $30 premiere price tag associated with basically what amounts to a rental of the film. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. But let me talk about the movie. The movie's called Raya and the Last Dragon, and it follows Raya, who is a warrior princess who must find the fabled last dragon in order to save her divided home world from a ravenous plague. Throughout her journey, Raya traverses the various kingdoms of Kumandra with an eccentric band of misfits by her side. And I think that's a pretty good description of the movie. No big spoilers in there. This one stars this animated film stars the voice talents of Kelly Marie Tran as Raya. We know Kelly Marie from the Star Wars films, right? Is that correct?
Rose. Yeah.
Rose in the Star Wars films. Awkwafina from several films. The one I really remember her from the most, I think, was what was it called? The wedding one? The
Crazy Rich Asians.
Crazy Rich Asians, yes. Great character work that she did there. So much talent in this one. Daniel Day Kim is in this. Benedict Wong, who we loved from the Marco Polo series and from Doctor Strange, I think. So loved hearing his voice. Again, with these animated features, we don't typically go in knowing exactly like all of the voice characters. It's fun to try to listen to the voices and see if you can kind of guess who that actor is that's giving that voice to that character. Sandra Oh is in this one. So yeah, there's a great talent across the board. The movie itself worked for me on some levels and didn't quite catch fire for me on other levels. So I'm kind of on the in between. I think visually, I think this movie is stunning for Disney Animation Studios. I think they did great work on some of the kind of setting up this world, and the camera, the virtual camera movements in this animated world looked very fluid and kind of drew you in, and all of the landscapes were interesting and provocative in some way. So I really love that. I loved the character of Raya. I really thought she was a great, kind of warrior princess, heroine, whatever you label you want to put on her, protagonist. But I did like her character, and throughout the movie, I thought it was great. And while I like Awkwafina as a voice actor, she has a very distinctive voice. I'm not sure. I think where this movie fell short for me was the dragon and the dragons. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I thought from the first time we see this dragon, and Awkwafina is the first one we see, it kind of took me back a little bit, because it was almost like, oh, wait, she's doing another movie than the movie I've seen for the first 15 or 20 minutes. It's like we kind of switched gears tonally, and it was very jarring for me, and it never quite meshed. Eventually, I kind of got more comfortable with the character, especially in the more serious or darker parts of the movie. I thought worked very well. I thought some of the comedy they injected worked well, and some of it felt a little bit silly and just kind of detracting from the story for me. So I'm mixed on it. I'm going to leave it there. There's probably a lot more to talk about. I'm mixed on it. Would I recommend people spend the $30 right now to watch this kind of in the premiere? I forget what it's called. The premiere event or something. Premiere access of Disney Plus. I think it's a little bit overpriced for what you get. I think people are probably going to like certain aspects of this film. Some people may love the whole thing. For me, I can't say that it's a definite, drop everything you do and go out and spend the extra $30 that you're already spending on top of your Disney Plus subscription to rent this film. But that's the way I see it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your initial thoughts, babe. Appreciate that. Justin in the chat says, haven't seen it yet, but thinking about it. So I think a lot of people are kind of in that boat. I haven't actually seen a lot of folks talking about seeing it on Facebook over the weekend. Jim, I think to your point, maybe some mixed reviews have thrown people off a little bit. So, again, Justin, form your own opinion, of course, but welcome. Glad to have you with us. Maybe our initial thoughts might help a little bit.
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
Can I add one thing? I know you want to bring Mary on, and I want to hear you bring Mary on, but I would add one thing, like Mary, for instance, if you've got a family that might want to watch this together, then I would say maybe the price, makes more sense, like for a family or a few people to watch it, where that kind of spreads that cost over multiple watching experiences. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's all right. No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, hey, Mary, belated hello. Mary says, you already know that Parker, her son, loved it. Really, really cute. So glad to hear that Parker enjoyed it. And yeah, Jim, absolutely a good point. If you've got a family full of kids that might enjoy this movie, $30 probably sounds like a pretty easy sell for 2 hours of, peace and quiet, maybe to some degree. But let's go to Will. Will, what did you think about Raya and the Last Dragon?
Well, I'm going to have to 100% agree with Parker, actually. I loved this movie. I want to talk about why, though. This movie managed to capture some of that Disney magic the way that I love it when Disney captures. I think about films most recently like you know, like Moana. And I definitely had that same feeling of like this was an epic journey where the story had stakes for the world, but they also had stakes for the protagonist. Like Raya, through this movie, she learns and grows and changes as a character, and in a lot of really interesting and fascinating ways that ties so closely to the theme. I loved all of the voice acting in this. I thought the all of the actors really brought their A game. I especially like Kelly Marie Tran as Raya, and I really liked Awkwafina as Sisu as well. Her role is supposed to be sort of the, you know, you a lot of times have in these Disney movies like the buddy duo, you know, where one person's sort of the straight person and one person's the comedic foil, and their job is to sort of bounce off of each other. But I think a lot of times the comedic foil is really just there to do jokes, whereas here the Sisu character, all of the humor was grounded in that character's like, I don't want to say naivety, but just sort of like the way that they saw the world and the way they interacted with the world, and the viewpoint that she brought to the world. And I love that so much. And I thought Awkwafina captured that so well, while also giving me some good laughs along the way. This is a beautiful looking movie. The animation in this is absolutely breathtaking, especially whenever you have water sequences, and there's a lot of water in this movie. Like, water ties very closely into like one of the major plot elements. And so you get to see this beautiful animated water, especially whenever you see like low water going over like stones or something like that. It's just chef's kiss, just absolutely beautiful to look at. Aside from that, this was an interesting movie to me because it really focused on telling a story that was very specific to the ideas and the people of like Southeast Asia, right? You know, you think like Cambodia, Singapore, Thailand, Laos. You have like, and this movie is not set in any one of those. This is a fictional version of Southeast Asia, but it blends a lot of these different attire, like a lot of their fashion and garments are sort of like woven in to create the different kingdoms that we have here. You hear a lot of like vocabulary get woven in as sort of slang words that we hear. One of my friends is a Laotian filmmaker. In fact, she was the first, I believe, the first female filmmaker that was allowed to create films in Laos, and she's just absolute like force of nature. And she was posting about this movie after seeing it, just saying like, you know, I make movies for a living, and I feel like this is one of the first times where I've gotten to see myself and me, aside from films that I've made, but to see like a major company to make films about me and about people like me, and little girls like me who, you know, maybe don't see themselves on screen. And it absolutely stopped my heart when I read that. Just, you know, it's so powerful. Anyways, I loved this movie. You know, no movie is perfect. You know, there's, you know, maybe a couple of elements where it foreshadows a little bit of what it's going to do, but it also has some nice surprises. And I don't know, is it worth $30? That's, everyone's got to make their own decision on that, right? Like, everyone's going to have to make their own decision. But if I were going to go see this movie with my family, I would spend more than that. I would spend way more than that, and I would have a less satisfying meal of like, you know, a giant thing of soda and popcorn or something like that, as opposed to like, you know, what we had for dinner that night. So if you have the money and you have a family, I think $30 is worth it. If, you know, if times are tough and you can't afford the $30, then by all means, you know, hold off and wait. But for me personally, I don't regret having spent it. I really enjoyed what I got from this film.
All right. Well, glad to hear that you enjoyed it so much. Well, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And again, you know, definitely a great point. You know, if you were able to go out and see this in movie theaters, and you know, a lot of folks may have been able to do that, probably would have cost more. You know, so factoring that into the cost value benefit discussion definitely makes a lot of sense. In fact, Mary says, yeah, for my crew of 4, go into the movies, it's always $60, maybe even more, depending on how hungry the kids are, or mom and dad, or dad and dad, or mom and mom, or whoever. Sometimes you want that jumbo popcorn, the hot dog, and the Raisinets, and the soda. That's $60 right there. So totally makes sense. For me, this was pretty mixed for me as well, Jim. I think maybe similar to you. Will, I absolutely agree. I loved the animation. I loved Kelly Marie Tran. She's so great in this. I will say, though, it's interesting, Will, that you brought up Moana, because I've been thinking about both films side by side quite a bit, actually. One of the things I loved about Moana is, for 3/4 of the film, it's Moana, Maui, and Hey Hey, the chicken, voiced by Alan Tudyk, who, by the way, also voices Raya's pet, Tuk Tuk, in this film. So that was kind of cool. But I think what I loved more so about Moana than Raya and the Last Dragon, with Raya, she's a phenomenal character, phenomenally acted, but I felt like I didn't get to see enough of Raya. This is more of an ensemble cast film than Moana was. You see it in the trailer. This is not a spoiler. The newest trailers that came out very much show every member of her posse. There's a baby and like 3, creatures with the baby. I'm trying not to give spoilers, but there's the big guy from the north, and we spend time getting to know these other characters, which I think is great, but it really made me miss like the dedicated time like around the central character. I felt like at times Raya got really swallowed up by kind of the crazy zaniness happening with all the side characters. And I really wish she would have been more in the spotlight and front and center. And I also think that would have helped with some of my issues with Awkwafina, who, by the way, I love and adore. She really hit my radar hard in The Farewell, which came out, I think, in 2019. Maybe, was it 2020? Yeah.
That's right.
Very serious role for her with bits of comedy sprinkled in. She was fantastic in that. I loved seeing her in this film, but it was kind of flipped. It was mostly comedy with little bits of seriousness kind of sprinkled in. And in an ensemble film like this, I almost wish we could have gotten a lot more of just Raya and Sisu, or that maybe they toned some of the comedy with Sisu down, since the ensemble cast was such a comedic force, just to balance that out a little more and maybe ground the presence a bit. There's also some anachronistic terms that get thrown in, and we can talk about those in spoilers, but like things you might hear someone say, back in like 1997, that just really kind of pulled me out of the film and reminded me that I was, listening to Awkwafina riff and not Sisu the dragon in her world, talking as maybe a dragon would. So I would say I enjoyed the film. Since I do not have a family, since I do not have children, it's just me and Jim and the cats. I don't know that I would say this was worth the $30 to watch it now. I probably would have waited a couple months to when it becomes available for everybody with your normal Disney Plus subscription. So if, like Justin, maybe you're kind of on the fence, I would say maybe wait. Unless it really looks incredible to you, I would probably just wait until you can watch it with your subscription when it's already included. But again, that's me. I'm just one voice. This is, a big movie coming out in the time of COVID, when a lot of big films are being pushed out. There's maybe not as much to see. So this could be something that, you decide to watch at home. I will say, though, we watched it in our projector room on a 120-inch screen. I think if I had watched this on like a normal size TV, it probably would have been less impactful for me, just because the visuals are so amazing. The sound is so great. If you don't have a super great setup, I feel like you could miss a lot of the brilliance that's kind of added in from those elements. So again, that's a judgment call for you, but that's up to you to make. So I am glad that we saw this movie. I'm glad we're getting a chance to talk about it. I just, if I had made the movie, and I am not a filmmaker, it probably would have worked a little bit better for me. But then I'm a weirdo, so what do I know?
It's what's so impressive about this movie for me was, I think there's a good deal of like world building in this, and that's the world building happens in every film. It's, it's everything from the aesthetic choices, the word choices, the story, the lore that builds everything up. And here, I think this film does an exceptional job of creating this world. Each one of the different sections, the little I don't want to call them kingdoms, but divided off regions,
villages, or whatever. Yeah.
They all have their own very unique flavor. Like when you would see characters from one, you knew instantly kind of like where you were at or why they were there, kind of what their vibe was. If anything, I mentioned there was sort of like one flaw for me, and it's just that I think this is the type of movie that I loved it as a movie, but I think there's an alternate reality where this is like an 8-episode like series. And I think that kind of like bumps, like if this is like a 4.5 star for me or whatever, then that bumps it to a 5 star, because I think that this is a world that I wanted to spend more time in. I wanted to see a little bit more in each of the different areas. I wanted to spend more time with those characters, not because I wasn't getting enough, but because I wanted so much more of it. And so it's like, it's a good problem to have, but I really did think this was sort of like, this could have been a very successful series.
It's interesting that you bring up that topic, Will, because we were kind of talking about that as well. Our friend Kevin, who's staying with us, said the exact same thing. And, as I'm thinking about sort of my issues with like the ensemble cast sort of being unbalanced, right, against Raya and Sisu even, I think if this were like a 7 or 8 episode TV series, there would have been a lot more room to have the cake and eat it too, right? Rather than maybe having to make some of those choices. So I think that could have worked a lot better for me personally. And again, I'm not saying the movie's terrible, but man, now I kind of want like a Raya series. I don't know that we'll ever get that, but that could have been good.
I did like the way the story kind of, the posse that she was traveling with kind of built itself at, kind of organically to the story, right? As now, granted, to Will's point, I think they did bounce through a couple of the areas very, very quickly, kind of breeze through like, oh, we're in this part of this kingdom or this section of the countryside with these people, and you kind of are starting to get to know what's going on there and get a feel for it. And then boom, 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 plot happens and they're out. But they maybe pick up a character, that kind of follows the rest of the story. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Like you have a little bit of a reminder of each area that they visit, or, to kind of follow the story all the way through. And I thought that was good. But yeah, I think that was a little quick. I think there's a baby, there's the Benedict Wong character who was interesting. There's another little boy, right, who joins them, who happens to be he's a chef or something. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So yeah, all these characters I thought were very interesting, and I just and I get it. It's kind of like Avengers Assemble kind of thing. So it reminded me a little bit of that, like, these Super Friends kind of teams that, we've been getting throughout the years in these adventure stories where the protagonist kind of forms a team of sidekicks or partners, and they all have their own role to play and tasks to do, and it all kind of fits together in the end. And that none of that is new. I mean, that doesn't really feel fresh, but I did like some of the aspects of some of the characters.
Jim, I like that you bring up that even though we're like doing all this region hopping, we're like in a region for like 5 seconds and then we're on to the next thing. Yeah. It's definitely cool to like bring a character from that region on to maybe get their perspective and have them continue to be part of the tapestry. I think my issue is, we can maybe talk a little more deeply on this in spoilers. I don't know that I felt those characters were distinct enough in terms of bringing their regional differences to like the plot and the decision making and what happens. Like, I feel like 2 of the regions were super well represented and I love what we got, but the others just all kind of blended together for me. Like, oh, you dress differently? Cool, but like, what else makes you different? You don't know? I don't know either. You know what I mean? So I wish there was a bit more of that. Maybe if we did have a TV series, to Will's point, there'd have been more time for some of those things. Just such a great opportunity for world building. We definitely got some of that, but I feel like I really wanted more. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag.
I think to me, I'm trying, and we'll get into this in spoilers, but I'm going to try to name, when we get into spoilers, I'll try to name the different characters without looking at the IMDb, and not name them, but I mean, at least identify which ones I remember from, you know, from the group of main characters towards the end. I know, like you said, Brad, it wasn't just two of them, but I can remember two or three of them. You know, I mentioned three of them. I'm struggling to come up with like 4 and 5.
I had I guess a more positive reaction to each of those characters, just in that I felt that so there's a through line to this storyline about like why they're all coming together. They're not just coming together because, you know, it's fun to do it. It's the main crux of the story is, you know, them coming together, right? And each one of them brings a very, like, every one of them has been harmed by this rift in a very specific way that you see in the way that they, you know, the world as it is now has impacted them in a very specific way. The thing that they need from the other characters is something that is very unique to them and very unique to the group that they're able to get. And each one of them has their own, like the way that their region's little cultural response to the trauma. Each one of them has responded in a very different way. And to me, it feels so pertinent to what we've all been through very recently. We've all been very fractured and very isolated and kind of split into little groups, geographically because of, quarantine and not being able to leave our houses. But also, I mean, politically and everything else that's going on right now, there are so many different rifts where we formed these little insular pockets. And I love that this movie really tries to look at each one of those pockets is valid because the trauma that got you stuck in that pocket is valid, but also there is value in trying to find ways to break through that, at least where you can, in a way that kind of moves you forward.
I think that's an interesting thread that we should follow, but this is getting harder and harder to talk about this film without going into spoilers. So I feel like now is probably a good time to take that lid off, and then we can continue that discussion. Jim, Will, are you down for Spoiler Town?
Take me there.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We're going to go ahead and open up a big old can of spoilers with regards to Raya and the Last Dragon. If you haven't seen the film yet and you value your innocence where the plot of the film is concerned, completely understandable. If you're listening live, this is probably your chance to step away for 15 minutes and then come on back at the end for plugs if you like. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, and not everybody knows what tapes are, I discovered this weekend. Kevin. Then if you're listening through your favorite podcast app a few days after we record, when the show comes out, use those handy dandy show notes. Skip ahead as needed. Oh my gosh, Chris Lopez, sexy voice of the Movie Bears podcast. Didn't even know he was here, but he is. He says, thanks for the review, but I'm going to drop out now. Spoilers. Chris, we love and adore you. So good to see you, even if only briefly. Would be interested to know your thoughts, friend, after you've seen the film. Don't forget to follow up with us, please. All right. All of that said and done. Here we go. Spoilers for Raya and the Last Dragon are officially fair game. Will, yeah, definitely a great point about sort of the fractured like pockets of people in that throughput line. I think what would have made that a little bit better for me is just knowing like what really makes Fang different from Spine. What really makes Spine different from Heart? Like, yeah, they dress differently. Yeah, they live in different geographical regions, but like, what are those fractures? Like before even the main plot of the film happens where the gem splits, Raya and her father, by the way, Daniel Day Kim, who I love and adore, they're talking about like bringing everybody back together and trying to reform Kamanja, but like, what is it that separates them? Like, is it crazy xenophobia in one tribe? Is it like germophobia in another tribe? Is it, free love in one group and super conservative religion in another group? I don't feel like I understood the boundaries between those people. And for me, it made it a lot less impacting when at the end of the movie, everyone's all like, Captain Planet, and like comes together. It's like, well, cool, that's awesome. But like, are there still differences? Like, are people still going to need to work through some things, or is it just all magically put together again, like the gym? I don't know.
Well, I don't think it is magically put together, because this is the story of this movie is about trust, and trust is not about homogenization. Trust is about being able to let go of the things that you fear in others, so that you can move forward together, and hopefully allow them to let go of those fears as well. And we see that both before the gym shatters in this, when we get to introduce to the different regions, each one of them has its own geographical concerns, but each one of them also has kind of like a viewpoint in terms of like what it is that how they've responded to this life post dragons and post everything. The people of Fang have at the beginning of the movie they're struggling because they do not have the resources that they need, and they see that in Heart there are resources, and they decide that, of course, that political deception is the way to try to win the way. You see much more of like an isolationism with Spine, the ones that are kind of walled away in the mountains because they are the big burly like mountain folk, and that's who they are. They're brusque. That's what they do. We get to see
that's where I go.
That's where you'd go.
Yeah.
We get to see just how the people in the fringes of Tail, in probably the most desolate of areas, have formed this little cluster near the only water that they can find. I love seeing like the big city of thieves in what's the last one? Tail. Or the last one's called. We get to see that city of thieves and just sort of like what it's like to live in a place where there's like both prosperity but also like risk and chance. And we get to see all of those things taken, I think, even more so than anything. We see the blueprint for that when before the fracture really happens. But once that fracture happens and everyone covets their little piece and retreats, I think everyone becomes a more exaggerated version of themselves. Every one of those cultures has decided, like, well, now that I've got this, we're going to insulate ourselves even more and become a more exaggerated version. And again, I think about the analogy of all of those different pockets that we have in society right now. I think, there are obviously like, for me personally, there are people that I would consider like on the right side and on the wrong side. But at the same time, I am also cognizant of the fact that it's very easy for me to completely retreat within my bubble of only the people that I consider to be the right people, and other people to do the exact same thing. And then we form these little bubbles that where we have no chance of moving forward. So that's where I really saw the individual cultures sort of grow out of themselves and grow into an exaggerated version. They're at the end, their problems aren't over. They've found trust, because each one of those people that came along the way for Raya wasn't just like a kind of a sidekick coming along for the story. They were. That's the kind of the punchline role that they get to play with some of the scenes. But each one of them again has like the trauma that they experienced from the dustining, the statuing, whatever we want to call just like the big rift when everything shatters. All of them lost people. All of them were alone, separated from loved ones, and they had to find a new trust and new care and new abilities to sort of like break out of their own bullshit and touch base with other human beings. So I don't know, just I once all of that came together, just this whole story of like trust and what it means to build it in one another's. Literally, like the final sequences of this, I was like sitting there just like, wiping away the tears. Like it hit me. It really hit me.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the concept of you mentioned the one of the main themes, if not the main theme of the film, is trust and being able to trust in others, right? And by others, I mean people who aren't like you or people who don't necessarily share the same views, values, whatever you want to call them, with you. The way this movie portrayed it, though, I found a little bit, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but definitely different in that Raya trusted, was it Namari from Fang, right? I think she was from Fang,
right.
The girl, the other female character from Fang. From the very beginning, they kind of almost befriended each other. They did befriend each other right at the beginning of the film, and then boom, she's betrayed, like in a very hurtful, physical, slap in the face kind of way. So now that happened, and then later in the film, at least once, maybe two more times, Raya seems to be the one who wants to trust and puts her trust in Namari, and each time gets hurt or damaged in some way by Namari's reluctance to kind of be your friend or see things in any way like Raya does. So it's not like, oh, we need to trust these people because of the unknown. We're trusting them in this sense. The movie wants you to trust people who you know are going to hurt you, and that was a different spin that I hadn't seen before. And I'm like, well, how many times is she, by the end of the movie, I'm like, why are you trusting her again? She's going to totally stab you in the back again. Like the movie was telling us that she's going to stab her in the back, and then eventually she doesn't. She has her moment where her back's up against the wall, and she kind of does pulls all the gems together or something, I think, at the climactic moment, or helps pull all the gems together and finally steps up. But we have to get through several betrayals before we get to that point. And that was just an interesting aspect for me.
Babe, didn't you know that abusive relationships are totally okay as long as love wins in the end?
Well, it was kind of akin to a very toxic relationship in that one partner, Raya, was fully trusting most of the way through and then kept getting betrayed by Namari at several points. Now, maybe there were reasons why Namari acted the way she did, and maybe she had a bit of sympathy around her character because of, kind of her origin story. But still, it was tough to wrap my head around a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen some people on Facebook talking about how like the Namari and Raya friendship ends up being like a cornerstone of the film, and I agree that it does. Then they go on to say that it's like such a positive thing for their like young girls to grow up watching, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like they are fighting each other. They're like fighting each other with swords, and like you said, like betrayal and lying and deception, and I'm like, I'm not a parent, but like, I don't know that I'd want my kids learning those lessons, even if they are holding hands, buying each other a Coke at the end. It just seems like a weird message to me.
I don't know. I think for me, I think it's fair to look at films from different angles. So that's all valid. For me, I didn't see it that way, but I think mainly that's because I didn't see Raya as trusting Namari all through this movie. There's a lot of points in this film where like Sisu directly says like, hey, you need to trust her. And Raya's like, no, I can't trust her because she betrayed me when I was younger. And it's really like, there's really the only moment where she really begins to try to trust Namari again is at the very end when she hands her the gem. All until then, she treats her as someone who is just going to hurt her again. And so she never fully trusts her. She never like fully allows them a chance to heal. And I think that also it's important for me at least to recognize that, films that are like analogies are not always to be taken literally. Like it's not necessarily like, don't become best friends with the person trying to kill you with a sword. Yeah, I mean, true statement, very true statement. But I think that's that's an analogy for being able to try to find ability, like the way to reconcile with someone who, maybe something has happened in the past, or maybe you haven't given them that chance, or maybe you carry all of this cultural baggage too. I mean, even when in the opening, when they talk about each of the zone and the different regions, they talk about everyone in very stereotyped ways. Even the father characters, like, yeah, the people from here, they're big and they're strong, but they're also a little dumb. And over here, and like, we get to see that, like, the big, strong, dumb one, it was also from Spine, was also the one who was the most able to recognize the needs of the baby and being able to connect with that character in sort of like a nurturing role. So I like that we got to see a lot of subversions. Every one of the characters was a part of their culture, but everyone was also their own unique person within it. And that sort of like blend was what brought them together as a unit.
I appreciate that view. It's just like there was a moment at the end where I was like, I don't believe she's like trusting this character again, because I think she betrayed her like at the beginning, and she betrayed her kind of towards the end with the when the dragon
up on the plateau.
Yeah, up on the plateau. And it looked like that was going to be a moment where, Namari kind of came around, and I think, was it Namari who ended up shooting?
Namari ended up shooting her, but her finger was tensed on the trigger, and Raya immediately thought, well, she's going to shoot her anyway, so lashed out. And that moment of startled is what caused Namari to flip the trigger and pull it. So,
but Raya did that in response to Namari having her finger on the trigger and bringing it closer. Like they deliberately show us Raya looking at her, and then the finger moving on the trigger after Namari has this like tearful moment of, oh my God, Sisu really does exist, and blah, blah. Like why would Namari tense her finger on a trigger, over this dragon figure that she loves? And I think, that's why Raya has the reaction that she does. So that does seem to be a little bit of a betrayal. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say neither character trusted either character in that situation. Namari thought that Raya was just like that. It was not going to pan out well for her. Raya thought, oh, she's tensing. That means she's 100% going to do it. This was a situation where I think that if both of the characters had come into the conversation more earnestly, it would not have ended that way. And I think that's the point of that scene. Not that Namari was the villain who was trying to deceive Raya. And but it was, I think for me, the way it read was like both characters caused that arrow to hit when it did.
Yeah, I think Namari's, they both bring mistrust into that scene, right? They're both mistrusting each other. That's a good point. They both come to that point with mistrust in their minds. And I think Raya's mistrust comes from a place of experience with that character, right? Like, you've betrayed me before. I've seen you do it. I felt the effect of that. It hurt. And now I don't trust you. Whereas Namari's mistrust, I think, is more cultural, like from like we don't trust these people over here. These individuals can't be trusted. So we're gonna.
And don't forget, Robin Wright told her not to trust.
Well, that's what I meant, like cultural and her upbringing, right? With the mother. I forget who voiced the mother and what the character's name was, but she reminded me so much of Claire Underwood in House of Cards. It was kind of spooky.
Now, Claire.
That was that the Sandra Oh character?
Yeah. Who,
by the
way, also excellent in the film.
Love Sandra Oh. Yeah.
But again, I think, and Will, going back to what you said at the beginning of the show, I think, if this could have been a TV show where we got more room for a lot of these things to develop, this might have been more effective. I keep coming back to Avatar: The Last Airbender. That show is a perfect example of how you can have characters who start off as adversaries, and there's not trust, and bad shit happens between them, and by the end of the series, it's like best friends and these amazing relationships. But that show also had 60 or whatever episodes, right, to build that up and also show their characters like on their own, not part of the main ensemble before they ever come together, still doing good things and still having good hearts, even if they're at odds, right, with the main characters. And I think we just didn't get enough time with Namari, seeing what she was going through on her own, and Fang and her relationship with her mom, to make that as effective as it could have been for me. But that said, we still got an hour and a half long movie with some cool stuff in it. So even if it's not exactly what we wanted at the end of the day, Disney has birthed something cool out there that may not necessarily be for everybody. But how cool is it, guys, that we just spent the last 50 minutes and 47 seconds talking about this film that, fundamentally is pretty much meant for kids, but we were able to draw some pretty adult concepts cool. and themes from it. So
worth the $30.
I'll call that a win. How do you fellas feel about moving on to some plugs as we look to wrap up?
You know what, Brad? I trust that decision.
Yeah, I trust you.
I promise not to betray you.
Was that your little finger right there?
That was my little finger. Chaos is a ladder. Anyway,
where's Santa?
Ask Ramsey. Okay, so plugs. Here we go. Here we go. This is the part of the show where we put a few things on your radar that have been on ours that we have enjoyed for whatever reason. It can be film, it can be TV, music, games, whatever it is. We're sending it your way, and let's kick things off with Will for plugs. What have you got this week?
I got another movie. And this one is probably a lighter recommend for me than the one we just talked about. So but here we are. It's called The Mauritanian, and it's the new Jodie Foster movie. It's out now. It's like in theaters, but also like you can rent it for like, I don't know, like $20 on like Amazon or Apple or any of those, like the, see it live while it's in theaters type thing. Right. And the movie is, it follows a guy who has been detained in Guantanamo Bay without having charges filed against him by the U.S. government, and is there for years. Just, and stuff happens there, the type of stuff that happened in Guantanamo Bay. I won't go into all the details. They're not pleasant. But Jodie Foster comes on. So does Shailene Woodley as her assistant, as like lawyers who are representing them, trying to get like the habeas corpus information filed so that they can at least have some sort of either detain this guy with charges or let him go, but don't just hold him here indefinitely. All of this based 100% off of an actual story that actually happened to a guy and his memoirs. It's very much like a procedural style drama, like not courtroom stuff, but just sort of the kind of the stuff that kind of surrounds it, like people like filing for Freedom of Information Act to try to get this stuff. She's set in opposition of Benedict Cumberbatch, who is playing one of the lawyers for the U.S. military. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think you've seen this type of movie before in that, like, you probably know what to expect from a lot of the beats that are within it. But Jodie Foster is super good. So is Tahar Rahim, who plays Mahamadou Ould Slahi, who is the guy that she's representing. The two of them are both really, really good together. And I think that's really the magic. The scenes where they interact with one another are just sort of like masterclass acting, like super fun to watch. So it's called The Mauritanian. And if you kind of want, we talked about a kid's movie. This is definitely kind of the opposite. This is an adult drama. This is, not the same energy, not the same vibe, but I liked it. Didn't love it, but I still think it's a good worthy watch.
Well,
so Mary,
go ahead.
Mary, just be sure to put that one on for Parker before bed tomorrow. It'd be great.
Will, This one has my eye. I thought you said going into it. I thought you said you were going to be getting into something lighter. Maybe I misheard you.
No, like a lighter recommendation, like
Oh, I see.
sometimes I come into these plugs, I'm just like, oh my god, guys, you got to watch this movie. It's the best thing ever, and that's not what this is. I want to temper expectations.
Gotcha.
This is a good movie. It's not a great movie, but it's a good movie, and sometimes you're in the mood for a good movie.
All right.
Sure.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Jim, what have you got this week?
I have one that many people, including one person in this threesome, had on their end of the year list that I hadn't gotten a chance to watch until after our lists were out. And that was One Night in Miami. Finally got around to watch this. This is a movie on, I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. I don't think you have to pay extra for it. I think you can just put on Amazon Prime if you have Amazon Prime and go watch it. This is a movie about one night in Miami, obviously. It's kind of a semi-fictional account of a meeting, a one-night meeting between black icons Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown. All super prominent, and this happened in the 60s. I think it was 64 or 63 when it was set. And these names were all huge at the time. And all these men, this movie kind of posits, okay, what happens if they all kind of get together and share their ideas and experiences, but they all bring their own like personality into it, which is what I loved about this film. I thought the performances were wonderful all across the board. Leslie Odom Jr., Aldous Hodge, Eli Gorey, and Kingsley Ben-Adir all put great performances out. Very riveting from the get-go. Not a lot happens. This isn't really a plot-driven movie. This is kind of a drama. Think of like 12 Angry Men, but these were like four men, four famous men in the 60s, kind of ruminating on their ideas about what it is to have their level of success in an environment where, if you're not that famous, if you're not that talented, like the best singer, the best fighter, the best football player, or political figure, life isn't so great. So I think this was a fascinating movie for me. Might have been on my top 10 for the year if I had seen it, but check it out, folks. One Night in Miami. It's pretty special.
All right. Awesome, sweetheart. Well, glad to hear that you enjoyed it so much. Mm-hmm. For me this week, I know a lot of folks are talking about the Justice League Snyder cut that's coming out on the 18th. I'm sure we'll watch it for the podcast at some point. Although that's right smack dab in the middle of our South by Southwest online experience is coming up. And oh my gosh, I'm so fucking excited for that.
Oh no.
Yeah. I probably will not be taking a break from South by Movies to watch Justice League, the Snyder Cut. Just saying. But all of this is a lead into my plug. I want to plug the new Superman and Lois show that is on the CW that is being funded and partially fronted by HBO. The show has got the HBO money. It's got phenomenal casting. 3 episodes of the show are out at this point. And it was funny, Will, I know we were talking about the Snyder Cut of Justice League before the show, and you were like, man, I really want to watch a Superman movie where he's in a loveless marriage with Lois Lane and he's tortured. And this show, I don't know if you've seen it, Will, Jim. I know we've been watching it together, but
a couple of them, yeah.
It's without going into spoilers. It's just such a breath of fresh air, even though cinematically it looks very similar to Man of Steel. It's got some similarities in terms of its like orangey sepia color palette. This show is all about like Superman, Clark Kent, and his relationship with Lois. They have an amazing marriage that does have problems. It's not perfect. They have 2 children. There's some crazy things going on there. Going into the series, it was like Superman as a parent. Fuck, really? Are you kidding me? But every episode of this show I see, the better and better it gets. And I think this has become like my definitive version of Superman since Christopher Reeve. back in the late 70s. So enjoying the hell out of this show. If anybody's on the fence and you're like, oh fuck, like another stupid Superman thing, maybe because of your experience with Man of Steel and Snyder's influence, Superman and Lois might be the breath of fresh air you're looking for into a character that historically has been very difficult to have shows and movies centered around. How do you take someone who's invincible and has all the powers and is a paragon of goodness and make him a multifaceted, interesting character that's not a caricature? And I think this series does that well. So check it out, Superman and Lois on the CW.
That's super exciting. I haven't watched the episodes yet, but I did watch, like before the first episode aired, they sort of like released the first sequence, like I guess up to the first commercial break. And I watched that, and even watching that, like what, 5 minutes or whatever that was, that preview clip was, like that became my definitive Superman of the era. Cause it was like, you know, like it's Superman is the type of character who, it's not necessarily hard to get him right, but it's very easy to get him wrong. And I think a lot of media has gotten him wrong as a character lately. And it's been just sort of like, it's been disappointing. It's been very disappointing. And yeah, I'll have to visit those episodes and spend some more time with them now that we're probably on the other side of South by. But you know, now that more time is freeing up and now that a few episodes are out, because yeah, I'm excited. I'm sold.
Yep. Definitely would love to hear your thoughts.
It's so funny. Brad, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but like, I think of the show as kind of like taking the best elements of like Smallville and Man of Steel and kind of merging them together into something, you know, with a good story. Like, and it's interesting because like I think back to my first experiences with Superman, which was the old 60s TV show, 50s, 60s TV show with
George Reeve.
George Reeve TV show. You know, he jumps out windows to fly and stuff like that. It's just, it's interesting because like since Smallville, like we get to see like this whole world of that Superman actually has a life beyond being in costume or working at the Daily Planet as Clark Kent. Because in that series, that's all you got to see. I think you never got to see like anything outside of those two roles that he had. And now this show focuses more on a totally different role than either of those two. Even though those two are part of the story, what they really focus on is what kind of man is Superman, you know, in his family and so forth. So different.
Yeah, definitely. And I loved the old, you know, George Reeves show. Certainly Christopher Reeve. Jim, you mentioned Smallville, which makes my nerd heart beat a little fast.
Nerd boner.
I have a little bit of a boner hearing Hugh, of all people, talk about Smallville. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's been an evolution of the character through the ages. I felt like Man of Steel was a really big step back. I liked a lot of the cinematography and the effects, but just like tonally and plot-wise, just not a fan. So I think you just cemented for me, babe, how I look at the show, because you're absolutely right. It's the best of Smallville and Man of Steel all in one package. And we have another episode waiting for us if we want to watch it tonight after the show. We didn't get to watch it last night. But yeah, thanks for, you know, a great show, fellas. We had a lot of good discussion this week. I'm so glad that we ended up doing the show. We were originally slated to do it last night relative to when we're recording. And I was not feeling great after my first COVID shot, feeling way better today. But thank you, gentlemen, for your flexibility. Sorry, a work thing like almost canceled the show and then uncanceled the show, but we figured it out. We made it work. Just a heads up for everybody, we are taking next week off because it is South by Southwest Film Festival. It's all online this year, which is super cool. Guys, I've been looking through all the films. I've been making my reservations. I've been building my schedule. We're super, super pumped to see Clerk, coming from filmmaker Malcolm Ingram, who's part of the Bear community, all about the career, life, and times of Kevin Smith. We're going to get an opportunity to sit down with Malcolm and chat about his new film, and so can't wait to catch up with him. He's been a guest on the show a few times over the last 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is. I don't remember anymore. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. And how much of a zombie do you guys think we're going to be doing this online this year versus in person in years past?
We got a little taste of that during Sundance. This may be actually a little bit more intense because the films are scheduled, I think, like a little closer together and starting earlier in the day. So kind of like it was when we attended South by Southwest in person. Like we would start at we would get up at 6:30, but and stand in line and start movies at like 10 or 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're going to be long days, so strap in.
Well, and compared to, we've done, there's been a few of these virtual festivals that have happened kind of during the pandemic where a lot of them are set up where it is definitely in blocks. First block, you choose from one of these movies. Second block, you choose from one of these. South by is every 2 hours, they're releasing more movies. But that doesn't mean that if you have ones from the last block that you haven't watched, you can keep watching. So technically, you could watch a movie the second the credits roll, start the next one. The second you could watch however many movies that daisy chains to through the course of the day. So yeah, it's going to be important for us to try to pace ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not try to set any records. Bill Harris.
Don't tell me what to do, Jim.
Right.
Don't fucking tell me what to do.
Love Bill Harris. Green Screen Death podcast. I feel like, gosh, maybe we can get some other folks who are doing this virtually too together. We're definitely going to have a South by highlights episode coming up the week after next when we come back. But as is usual, we'll probably have 3 or 4 episodes coming out, bonus content, all kinds of stuff coming out of South by. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Scott Stace, oh my gosh, hello friend.
Whoa.
Good to see you. He says, woohoo.
Hey Scott.
Boys. Hey Scott. We're wrapping up. So you were just in the nick of time, but good to hear from you. Hope that you and Tommy are doing well. We miss you bunches. Jim, Will, as usual, been a total pleasure. Thank you for helping to break up the stress of the week. And for everyone who joined us in the live chat as well as through the magic digital tape delay, we love you. We hope you're safe. And we look forward to seeing y'all next time. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.